Now recently, a lot of people have asked me to stream Counter-Strike Global Offensive or start playing some of that game, and I can understand due to the rapid popularity. But that's not a real game that I typically want to stream, and not a game that I really am known or want to be known really for playing. Not that it's a bad game in general, it's because it's not my style of playing, but I figured I'd want to make a video like this. Now, I made a video a little while back called What is Metal Gear Acid? And the video is all about covering Metal Gear Acid. And I quite enjoyed making that video. And I enjoyed it because I talked about a game franchise that I started to look into, and I enjoyed learning about and playing it. Now here is Counter-Strike, and I sort of have a personal attraction to this game, and again I want to make a video in the vein similar to that. So before we begin, that's typically what I'm prefacing this by. Now, a lot of people know Counter-Strike today from its very, very widely popular iteration, Counter-Strike Global Offensive. In fact, this is one of the most streamed games ever, and is a game that pretty much stands as a pillar of esports. But the Counter-Strike series never ever started from there. In fact, Counter-Strike was originally a mod developed by Min Lee and Jess Cliff in 1999. Originally a modification for Half-Life, developed by Valve, running on the Gold Source engine. It was a game that pitted counter-terrorists versus terrorists against numerous maps, where there were three main objectives, typically bomb defusal, hostage rescue, and VIP escorting, and these game types have stayed true and alive to the following day. There have also been other mods and maps and custom game types created by the community, obviously, but these three are the official ones. Now, there are obviously other ones developed as time went on, but that comes on in later iterations of the title. The original Counter-Strike, being a mod, can also be referenced as Counter-Strike 1.6, the game that I have a personal affection with. The reason why Counter-Strike 1.6 can be used is because that is the final software update in the Counter-Strike mod lifeline. Several remakes, ports were created. In fact, Counter-Strike was also released on the original Xbox console, and despite, of course, being inferior to the PC version, it was still a well-playable version of the game that you could, pop up and play on your Xbox. In fact, I think it's actually available from Xbox 360 backwards compatibility, so if you can score a copy for a relatively cheap price, I'd say hit it up, because it's actually not that bad of a game, and I put it in my gaming library. Why not? Now, as Counter-Strike released, for me, and this is going to be a little personal, Counter-Strike 1.6 is a game that I used to play before I did anything. Before I ever touched YouTube, before I, touched a lot of the console games that I had a PC for the longest time, and not that brand spanking new of a PC, but one that could play Counter-Strike 1.6 and Source relatively well. When I used to play Counter-Strike 1.6, I had a group of friends, I guess you could say a clan, and we used to play for hours on end. Literally, I would do my homework as soon as I went home. I would go outside with a couple friends, and as soon as I came home, I fired up my Counter-Strike 1.6 and played till the cows came home. This was truly an amazing game at the time, and I got really good at it, in fact. Nowadays, I can't really play Counter-Strike a lot because of numerous other obligations in my life. In fact, if I loaded up Global Offensive right now, I would showcase a high amount of suckage at the game. Now, the original Counter-Strike played as follows. There would be two teams, obviously terrorists and counter-terrorists. Players would go on and pick one of four available player models. After that, players would be given a set amount of money in the beginning, typically $800 for them to buy a starting pistol or maybe some armor. And they would run around completing rounds, and they would be awarded money given on how many kills they achieved and how many rounds they had won. And then they could use this money to buy more dangerous weaponry, such as sniper rifles, shotguns, and assault rifles, as well as several submachine guns. And time would go on and on and on until one side won a fair amount of matches and overall won the game. You'd be given only one life the entire round, so if they killed you, you'd be gone until the next round began. And the game was notoriously difficult. I mean, you could get shot down at any point, and obviously this worked well towards his competitive favor. The game is a difficult game to master. You cannot walk into Counter-Strike and simply expect to get kills and kills and kills, as you would expect newer, more casualized games in the series nowadays. Counter-Strike required a finesse to it. It required not exploiting the game by any means, but it required actually getting your shots right, and in a heated conflict between you and another player, it actually got pretty pulse-pounding. You never knew who was going to win, and you had to get your shots on point, because one failed shot on any gun and you were a gunner. That's how Counter-Strike played then and still plays today. As the community grew larger for the games, more and more maps were created by the community and game types as well, and modded servers became somewhat of a norm, offering many available and many awesome game modifications to the game already. Internet cafes popularized themselves on actually showcasing Counter-Strike off to players and allowing them to play. In fact, when I went to a trip in Pakistan one time, I actually noticed that there were a ton of cyber cafes in the areas that I had visited, and a lot of them actually offered players $20, I guess, so to say, fee to go inside and play Counter-Strike for an hour or something. And it was selling like hotcakes. People were lining up to play Counter-Strike and LANing with each other. And honestly, I did splurge in and pay and try to, play some Counter-Strike, and I did get my ass kicked, but it was a fun hour, let me tell you that. Cafes are not necessarily as popular over here in North America, at least as far as I've noticed, as compared to, say, cafes in, the Asian parts of the world. Over there, there's like a dime a dozen, and you can go anywhere to get your Counter-Strike fix, if anything. And tons of people line up, they have the little competitions, and it's a nice place to game, I guess, if anything. Eventually, Valve realized, man, we got a cash cow on our hands, and decided to actually purchase the rights for Counter-Strike so they themselves could release games later on in the series. Now, after Counter-Strike 1.6, we were treated with Counter-Strike Condition Zero, and this is where the Counter-Strike series personally took a little dip and went through a mini development hell, so to speak. Now, it started development in 2000 and was released actually in 2004. And when it was initially being developed, it was created by Rogue Entertainment. And when debuting it in May 2001 at E3, Rogue decided to apparently say fuck all and move towards Sony. And the company, being defunct, left Valve with the development. After that, they eventually passed it off to Gearbox, and then later on it was sent to Turtle Rock Studios, who, again, picked up again where Gearbox... It had a bunch of developers under its belt, so to speak. Now, as far as the look and feel of the game went, it was largely similar to the original Counter-Strike. There were some updated character models, textures, some maps, and a few graphical tweaks, but what was most important in this game was the introduction of the bot. But little fact here, the game was not the first Counter-Strike game to put the bot, and that was actually the original Xbox version of Counter-Strike to have the bots. Now, through older plugins and mods in the original Counter-Strike 1.6, you could put in bots, so you necessarily didn't need Counter-Strike Condition Zero, but here the bots were introduced officially, and the bots were actually pretty advanced for the time being. They were actually praised, more and large for how good the AI was. And more so, this game actually did focus, say, a single-player campaign in form of deleted scenes. Back when Rogue Entertainment was making it, they actually, when they were defunct, these missions were recovered and released later on as the deleted scenes. But the game did have a single-player component to it. In my opinion, it wasn't exactly that great, but yeah, it was there. There was also another little single-player component where you were just put against bots and you were given sort of like some requirements. For example, kill the enemy team in 90 seconds, or, vice versa. Little mini objectives like that. Nothing too substantial, but it was there. The game, for the most part, was actually just based on its multiplayer component, like all Counter-Strike games typically are. And in that regard, not a lot of people were really excited by it. It was, again, large in part, it was the original game, for the most part, except with a couple updated tweaks here and there. It just wasn't too different from what it originally was. It was a little out of date for being in development for so long and not really offering much new to the table, so to speak. Now, if you really want to think about it, the initial release date of Condition Zero was pretty much thrown out the fucking window when Counter-Strike Source was announced. In fact, Counter-Strike Source, came out, I guess you could say, several months after Condition Zero, November 1st, 2004 to be exact, on the Windows platform. And 6 years later on the Mac, and only 2 years ago, really, on the Linux platform. So Counter-Strike Source was, again, a complete remake of the original Counter-Strike, and it was rebuilt on the Source engine, which powered Half-Life 2, Team Fortress 2, Dota 2 actually runs on the newer Source 2 engine if you actually run it through the beta Left 4 Dead. So basically it's the engine that Valve has basically created a standard for itself, and being a Valve product, of course, they got to put it on the new engine. Now, this game was given a much higher praise, much higher level of, admiration, you could say, compared to, say, Counter-Strike Condition Zero. The game again featured the same gameplay, same game types really of the original games. Again, it was a remake. It wasn't going to split itself away from Counter-Strike, in any fashion. This wasn't Counter-Strike 2. They weren't sort of, changing up how the game played. This was Counter-Strike in its entirety, and that's what it, again, should be. Now, Counter-Strike Source looked jaw-dropping for its time. In fact, I'll be honest, some of these graphics when I was younger, and I actually played this game for the first time, I couldn't even max this game out on my computer at the time, but when I saw it at the settings I even saw it at, it was actually a really, really awesome looking game, and I was personally blown away by it, even running at a very, very low resolution at the time. Because, again, my computer wasn't powerful enough. Everything was updated, character models looked beautiful, the maps were beautiful. In fact, a lot of the maps from the community really, really pushed itself nearly on launch, I guess you could say. Maps like FY Ice Roll, a lot of the surf maps that I love playing, all that kind of stuff, was all there. There was actually a lot more mods given on this game, too. There was actually a big modding community made because the Source engine allowed modifications a little more easier. They handed out the SDK like that. Not that it wasn't available originally, but it allowed for a larger mod support community. If you could, the engine really gave that feature out. It was really pushed, and that is one thing that really kept it alive for the most part. Not just in the competitive scene, but a lot of people who weren't playing the game as competitively, so to speak. The game would also be used in tandem with Gary's mod to create, mods such as Trouble in Terrorist Town and other major mods too out on the market that people could play together. And that's what led to a lot of its popularity. Again, not just in the competitive scene, but also in the scene where people played a little more casually than, say, esports players in general. The game came shipped with about 9 maps on launch, and 9 maps that would come through later. All of these were remakes of earlier maps, just redone in the Source engine. The game kept quite a fair bit of support from Valve themselves. In fact, in 2010, the game was updated with a lot of features from the other counterpart they had in the franchise as well, such as Team Fortress 2, for example, this Domination Revenge system, and again, Steam achievements, which would pop up and manifest themselves in this update that would come on later. And it wasn't until, I guess, about 2 years later after that, in 2012, when the ever-popular Counter-Strike Global Offensive was released. Now, technically, if you discount any kind of a spin-off, this is the 4th main Counter-Strike game in the entire franchise, releasing on August 21st, 2012, worldwide. It plays on the Windows platform, the Mac platform, Linux, and it also has official console releases. Not, again, Counter-Strike originally in the Xbox was an official release, but here, you actually could get Counter-Strike Global Offensive on the Xbox 360 or the PlayStation 3. But mind you, those systems are nowhere near as updated as, say, the current PC, Mac, and Linux versions are. Now, originally, this game was meant to be Counter-Strike Source, except released on the Xbox Live Arcade by Hidden Path Entertainment. But during some point in development, Valve had thought, well, we could actually make this a full game, and decided not to just scrap the game entirely and, do something else with it, but rather to build upon it even more and more and more. And that's when, I guess, development for the game really, really began. And it eventually became what it is today. Not just Counter-Strike Source, a remastered version or, port of it, but rather a completely built from the ground up in a way game where a lot more focus was put onto the esports side, and the game was released with, I guess, a snazzier look. Definitely looks better than the original titles, definitely, that's for sure. The game would again rely on the same gameplay that Counter-Strike is always known for since the original. Over here, the game, had a little more game modes added onto it. For example, it had a classic, casual, and competitive mode, where competitive was basically original Counter-Strike, and casual, classic, was a sort of a primer for people getting into the competitive side. It had the same bomb scenario and hostage scenario. It had arms race, which was again gun game, but this was actually included in previous Counter-Strikes through mods. Then you'd also have a game type called Demolition, and then finally you'd have the Deathmatch, which is basically just a, again, deathmatch. 10-minute round consisting of people just killing each other, and respawns were again allowed. The game also again did give people the opportunity to play with bots, and a weapons course where you could go around and learn how to play the game for people just getting into the series themselves, or getting into this game specifically. Now, initially the game launched not with the features that we see today, but it was pretty bare bones, again, compared to what we have in Global Offensive these days, and played just like a regular Counter-Strike game. And it wasn't until August 13, 2013 when cosmetic items were thrown into the mix. You know those items you see where people sit down in those unboxing videos and unbox time and time again? Oh boy, how fun they are. But these items, again, had a value to the game. In fact, some of these items do sell for hundreds upon hundreds of dollars, typically knives, because they're so rare in the game itself. So it's actually interesting to see how that plays again in the Steam economy, so to speak. And alongside that, players had access to the Steam Workshop, where they could download custom maps with ease. And Valve actually did subsidize a lot of people who created these items, such as camouflages for guns and custom maps, by giving them breakout passes, or just typically operation passes, and Steam Workshop dividends as time went on. So it was nice to see them support the creators of this content, because it was all community created content, and it's nice to see a monetary system aiding those that do this for a living, because there are some that do. Now, as time goes on, music kits were also added, and tons of stuff was added into the game. Again, none of this would actually ever give somebody an unfair advantage. These are all purely cosmetic items in any case, so don't expect you to be getting any more kills with your amazing $100 skin, versus somebody who's playing with a regular stock skin, so to speak. There is no advantage given. Now, the game was praised by a lot of critics, again, for some of the new content given, but a lot of people said that it was more, again, of an update versus, a new sort of sequel or a new installment to the franchise. There were some minor improvements to certain maps that played on competitive game types. Most of the new maps were actually relegated to the arms race game type, so you never really saw them competitively as well. Again, there are some new maps given competitively, but for the most part, a lot of the new maps and features were related more towards the other game types, so not many people were playing, and it was, for the most part, just an update. A good update, but an update. That's essentially what it was. One of the big contributing factors to this game's popularity, however, is the esports and tournaments that were offered in the game as of recently. Now, Counter-Strike is by no means new to the idea of esports. In fact, it's one of those games that was originally a pillar of esports gaming. A lot of people really looked up to. In fact, it is one of the games that I would say defines what esports gaming is. That alongside with League of Legends, that was also based on Defense of the Ancients, and, alongside League of Legends, you also have Dota 2, and there are plenty of games that are in the esports, so to say, circuit, but Counter-Strike is one of those games that have been everlasting, so to speak. It's a pillar. It's one of those games that is very important to that side of gaming. Millions of dollars are handed out, across, esports everywhere. In fact, as of 27th October of 2015, CSGO tournaments actually have handed over $7 million in prize money to gamers worldwide, really. And these are hosted in numerous countries, top of them being France, Poland, US, and Sweden. Those are typically the countries where the esports are really, really, really pushed for Counter-Strike Global Offensive. In fact, the US cable television network TBS actually aims to broadcast Counter-Strike Global Offensive esports matches on national television, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is pretty interesting if you ask about it. It shows how far esports game has come through, and it shows how big of an impression Counter-Strike is in the gaming scene today. Being a big pillar in gaming, it's obviously no doubt that Counter-Strike was prone to some controversy as well, and I'm not talking about the esports scandal controversy, but if you want to know about that, there were several high-ranking players who, in fact, a lot of high-ranking players who were actually caught using cheats and mods to advance their positions in the game. Again, in a world where highly competitive gaming can be really, really competitive and new and up-and-comers can come anywhere, it's kind of understandable why cheats and mods are to be used to keep one's place high in the world of esports gaming. But Counter-Strike was also used as a scapegoat for certain attacks, such as the Virginia Tech Massacre, where the perpetrator, Song-Hee Cho, was alleged to be playing Counter-Strike and apparently trained on it in some way. Now, I'm not going to go too much into this controversy, but it's a fair point to say that there is a lot of media bias sometimes against video games, and some people don't know what the hell they're talking about. Many, many people play this game, millions of people, and you can't really blame the actions of one individual on the entirety of gamers in general, so I'm not going to make a huge point on this, but Counter-Strike was, again, prone to some controversy, again, with the game relatable so much to realistic killing and, depictions of counterterrorism and terrorism in general. Sometimes some people see it as glorification of terrorists. I don't really know how, but yeah, it exists in some way. Counter-Strike was, again, prone to its controversy. Now, you might be asking me, well, Mutahar, weren't there some spin-off titles created? Yes, there were. And I was afraid to do this segment of the video, but I guess I'd have to do it at one point. Now, Counter-Strike was prone to some pretty cringeworthy spin-offs. Well, one I'll notably go off by. There was Counter-Strike Online, which was a Korean version of the game, which is free to play. It's Counter-Strike with some cosmetic items you can buy. Some minor gameplay enhancements, but you'd be better off getting 1.6 anyways. They actually made a sequel to it called Counter-Strike Online 2. Oh boy. Yes, Nexon actually thought creating a sequel to one of the most popular free-to-play Counter-Strike Online games was actually necessary. This game ran on the Source engine, and as you can see, looks like it's a bad rip-off of Combat Arms. Go play that instead. It's really not worth playing this, trust me. Ooh. Now, moving on. There were more games created. There was typically Counter-Strike Nexon Zombies. Again, Nexon decided, well, we can take Counter-Strike and butcher it entirely by putting in zombies. This game, oh my god, I cannot play it. I mean, some may enjoy it, but I've tried playing it, and I just can't do it, man. Just can't do that shit. Now, Counter-Strike Neo was created, and this was a Japanese arcade game adaptation. You'd only be able to play this in Japan via some arcade machines. I personally don't have any experience in playing it, but looking at gameplay of it on the internet or, anywhere throughout, it doesn't look half bad, I guess. Kind of looks like some futuristic Counter-Strike thing going on, but hey, whatever goes on in Japanese arcade should stay in Japanese arcade. I don't know if that saying exists, but that was Counter-Strike Neo. So that covers most of the spin-offs. I'm sure there might be a couple others that I'm missing, but that covers most of them, and that covers the entire series in general. So as a closing thought, I don't really play Counter-Strike, as some other YouTube channels may do or some other streaming sites do, but I have played Counter-Strike, and I can say for sure that this game franchise, in my opinion, is as important as, say, Mario or anything else really in gaming, because it's actually a pillar. This game series is long-running, and it's always kept this tradition of giving quality content to players worldwide. Counter-Strike is a big phenomenon, not just to gamers, but to the esports world in general. And this game stands as a pillar, a testament to how strong esports is for gaming culture and gamers in general, and how strong this franchise has been since its inception. What started out as a mod has influenced other games in its relative franchise. For example, Call of Duty's biggest game type, actually, Search and Destroy, after obviously Team Deathmatch and Domination, is Search and Destroy, which, to be honest, is a clone, almost, of Counter-Strike's, bomb defusal game mode, and it's a good clone. A lot of people play it. In fact, if you stick any Call of Duty in and go to this game type, tons of players are guaranteed to be playing, even all the way back to Call of Duty 4. So you can see that this formula is very effective, and in a lot of competitive circles, this is the game type that you see happening a lot in the Call of Duty sphere. Even games like Battlefield and whatnot have taken a little nod from Counter-Strike, and of course these games all intermingle and share gameplay facets with one another. It's not just Counter-Strike feeding, it's also taking in information from other people. This game has evolved and adapted and popularized itself into common gamer, culture. And I guess if this video satisfied your Counter-Strike lore search, let me know in the comments below. This has been a closing thoughts, and personally, this game franchise sticks out to me. I may not play it a lot. I do have a lot of other things going on in my life, and I really can't dedicate it to just this game. I do play a lot more other titles nowadays than I used to play back in the day, when I was solely playing this game competitively. From a personal standpoint, I do love this franchise, and making this video just makes me want to play Counter-Strike a little bit more. So I think that's what I'm going to do after recording these VOs. But that being said, this has been a episode, I guess you could say, of what is, maybe that's a new series, I don't know, I just make videos. But this is, what is Counter-Strike, I guess you could say. So if you enjoyed it, if this satisfied your craving for lore or something, let me know in the comments below. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike it if you dislike it. This is me, Mudahar, and I gotta go beat some terrorists, defuse some bombs, and rescue some hostages in my Counter-Strike plundering that is to come. I am out.